To effectively communicate in the modern world, you have to not only have a high level of literacy, being able to take text and information and pull meaning, but you have to have a high level of visual literacy as well, being able to extract information out of images and symbols. For example, if we take a symbol such as the number 9, which we all know what that is, we can put it into a context that will change the meaning of what that symbol represents. Perhaps it represents days, perhaps it represents good deeds or a score. So by placing the symbol within the context, we can create more meaning for that symbol. Conversely, if we take that symbol and put it together with a context, you can create more meaning for the context in which that symbol is placed and extract more information of the entire story that's being told within that imagery. So visual literacy is about visual storytelling, and it is essentially a process of decoding and encoding information through visual cues and symbols and context, which is what we're going to look at today. So if we look at visual storytelling and the modern images that we are all literate in, we can see that by deconstructing it, there is more information that we can extract by looking at the components of the images rather than the image itself. So how do you do this? You read visual text by first decoding the symbols and the context in order to construct the meaning and then convert that into knowledge. What is not necessarily known or examined is that this can be externally conditioned or internally self-directed. So let's take a look. Here's a first example. This is a picture that we see in the news quite a bit, and it says I am news. But what we need to ask ourselves is who created this image and why was it created? What archetypes are they portraying in the subject, and what emotion is it that they are trying to elicit? Let's try another example. This says I am trendy. Again, who created this and why? And what is the stereotype that they are using in order to convey the message? And what emotion is it that they are attempting to elicit from the viewer with this imagery? Now, here's another image that we've seen in the news. I'm saying, what is this saying? And you can fill it in yourself. But another question you can ask yourself for visual literacy is, in what angle, what does the angle say about who you are in that story? And these types of questions. So the general idea of decoding these symbols is the recognition that symbolism itself is a coded language, and it's very old and it's been used for a very long time in order to embed information in something other than text. Now, mastering this visual literacy, what this enables you to do is it turbocharges your information processing, because it's bringing in a lot more than just your intellectual processing of text. It's also using emotion and images and symbols, which carry their own meaning. Now, another type of visual literacy is visualizing data. We can take these three examples here and see that one is trends, one is talking about portions, one is talking about process. And so these types of visual data decode relationships. So let's take one in particular. This visual data and this graph, we can look at it and ask, what is the purpose of giving us this information? And how many data points were used in order to determine this outcome? What is the message here? Because in the end, master storytellers are master encoders of information through symbols and archetypes and stereotypes and context. And these are the types of concepts that we need to really examine when we look at images. So we can also use stories to teach. Stories teach higher thinking skills, and we can also use them to teach how to encode and demonstrate these encoding techniques themselves so that they can be identified. So here's an example of something that one can create for someone who's learning this stuff. It's a storyboard. A plus B and D is a different outcome. But the question is, what happened between B and D? And the student can fill that in with their narrative and begin to understand how those images work. Here's another example. Assemble the evidence to tell a story from this image itself. What is it saying? And then you can take it a step further and say, what type of visual information can we add to further solidify the story that's being told here? And this is another example of how you can use images to provide examples of how they elicit emotion. That is the intention. So we look at what symbols and stereotypes are providing context and what archetypes are propelling the story. So, modern communication is different than the old types of communication. And if you don't understand how the visual literacy and the visual images work to communicate, you're not going to be able to effectively and competently communicate in the modern world. So you have done very well. You have brought in a lot of information. Next time we are going to talk about digital literacy, which is slightly different. But continue on, continue to learn, and thanks for joining us here today.